Wunderbar.
Okay, gentlemen, and even a few ladies, I think. Don't want to get ahead of myself, but optimistically, I think there might even be a couple who watch this stuff. Up for discussion this evening, OBD2 connector breakout box. If you're not familiar with what these are, what they basically do is allow you to take the connector that's on your car, typically under dash, of course, right? Female pins on the chassis side, and you can actually interface it through, there's a D plug here, you interface it through the harness here, and then it'll actually break out virtually all the pins on the connector for you. So you can then, I've just adapted a couple of little cheap banana plugs here. Now you can just banana plug into whatever pins you're actually interested in, and you don't have to put a crook in your neck actually trying to deal with a connector under dash and potentially spreading the pins on the connector, on the DLC connector. In addition to that, so $17 Canadian. Did I mention that? $17 Canadian. I don't get out of bed for $17. How can they produce this? The mind boggles. Yes, I know it's Chinese labor, and you know the parts are cheap and they buy it in bulk and volume. It just doesn't add up in my mind. It just does not. So in addition to the breakout box itself, that is complete with 15 4mm jacks. Keep in mind the DLC is of course 16 pins. So where does the shortage get made up? In this cheap version, you can see here that pins 4 and 5, the signal ground and chassis ground, are actually twinned. So they can use a standard 15 pin D plug and save themselves some money there, right? Still doesn't make for a $17 product, $17 Canadian. I mean, jumping. What is that? 10 pounds? 10 British pounds? Maybe 12 American dollars? Insane. Madness. But I'm happy to have it, right? Because it's well within my reach of affordability. Which brings me to the point, why did I buy the cheapest one going? The duty cycle on this tool for me is going to be extremely low. I cannot justify spending $200, $300 on the latest and greatest OBD2 breakout box. I'd love to have one. Listen, if I could afford it and you know, my money didn't have to go elsewhere, with respect to the budgetary constraints, I'd love to have one. But this is going to be more than sufficient for my purposes. Doesn't have any fancy, you know, there's no voltage, there's no meter on it telling you the system voltage. There's no LEDs telling you the activity on the bus, on the various buses, and nothing fancy, no alarms or anything like that. This is nothing more than a plastic box that's straight pinned to these 4mm banana jacks, female banana jacks. But the utility is there, right? I mean, if you want nothing to do with a box, jump in. I've got an extension for my scan tool now, because this is effectively, because it's the male and female side of the connector that are actually jumped together at the D plug. You essentially have a 4-foot extension for your scan tool. And that is the point to this harness, by the way. You can interface with the breakout box, you can interface with the car, and you can interface with your scan tool. So that is to say, you can have your scan tool operational at the same time that you actually have your scope up and running as well. So we'll take a look at the, I'm actually interested to try it. I've never tried it, so it's a dry run. We'll see how it goes. I'm interested in looking at, firstly, check to see if it's functional, and I want to see the activity on the can high and low, and I want to see if there's any activity on the K line, because in some of the schematics for the Suzuki product, the K line is actually utilized for diagnostic purposes as well. And of course, the power and the ground, I want to actually see that that's functional. Those are the primary pins. So what is that, a total of 5 pins total that I'm really going to be using. I'll show you briefly the pinout from, I don't know, some drawing somewhere. There you go, boys. In the interest of context, a quick look at the standard OBD2 connector, the DLC connector pinout. So you can see I've got my one side of the harness hooked up to the DLC under dash, of course. You can see I've got the other side of the harness actually hooked up to my scan tool. There's my scan tool, and it is actually functional. It's on the live data function at the moment, just in the OBD2 global mode, but just to prove the point, the data is streaming. I've got the D-plug, of course, hooked up to the breakout box, and I've got the scope actually hooked up here. What I've done is with a Handtech, actually it comes, because it's 8-channel, supposedly, it comes with tons of leads, and I've basically converted 2 of the leads that come in the kit. They're just alligator clips to the 4mm banana plugs, just wee cheap ones in my local hardware store. But so what I'll do is I'll go to the ground as a combined signal and chassis ground, as I said, pin 4 and 5, and I'm gonna go to pin 16. So up to the scope. Can you see the maximum value there on channel 1? The yellow channel is actually jumped up to 12.5. I've just got that on the measure there, channel 1 and 2, the yellow channel and the blue channel, channel 1 and 2 respectively. So yeah, it appears to be functional. That doesn't come as any surprise, because of course the scan tool is alive, actually obviously tapping off the same 12 volt feed from the DLC as the breakout box, but at least we know we have ground, and we have at least continuity with respect to the pin 16. So I hope that makes some sense there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a look at the CAN bus high and low. So I'm going to take the 1 pin here. I'm going to go over to pin. Let me get this right here. Trying to look at this through the viewfinder, boys. Okay, that's CAN low. Actually, I want to make this is, see the wee little. I've got the little white piece of heat shrink on there, so I know this is channel A. Makes sense for me to go to CAN high, pin 6, and I'm going to plug in my other lead here, the old school banana, where you can actually twin them in the hole below, which is kind of nice. And the other side of that channel, channel 2, I want to put on the CAN low, which of course is pin 14. Standard pinout. So let's see what we've got up on the scope here. I'm on different scales with respect to channel 1 and 2. Let me rectify that. Okay, so let me just stop that image. I don't want to set up a trigger here. Let me just stop that. So there we go. There's the CAN bus high and low signals. And again, this is on the cheapest of oscilloscopes. Okay. I've heard tons of guys say, oh, you can't see the CAN bus on the cheapest of oscilloscopes. Well, maybe that's been their experience. It hasn't been mine. Can we see a great deal of detail here? No. Does it suffice? I think for the most part, yeah. We can see we have the CAN bus high and low signals are actually present. Again, they're pinned out on pins CAN high, pin 6, and CAN low on pin 14. I'm going to the common ground, of course, and you can see the signals are both there, and the symmetry is there that we're looking for. So that to me makes pretty good sense. So do you need this? Do you need this? No, you don't need it. You can, as I said, you can crawl under the dash and you can pin out from the dash, and I have done so before, but this is certainly pretty handy. Right, so the because the K line was a wee bit of bust on pin 7 there, I've got the gear all set up. We might as well go for a start cycle, and we'll watch the how the scope reacts on an actual start cycle. I've got the garage door open so I don't kill myself. Let's get the scope actually in run mode. Notice the scope actually takes a full screen. Let me shut that off. You'll notice the scope actually takes a full screen before the minimum and max values actually update on this thing, so not instantaneous updating by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, make of that what you will. So what was it anyway, the figures? 9.14, and then the 13.4 on the alternator recovered to, so I think that's a pretty typical start cycle, huh? Yeah, So anyway, that's it, boys. I digress. The whole point of the little video here was the breakout box, giving you facility to break out the well, in this case, the 15 of the 16 pins on the DLC. And can think of a scenario where that might actually cause some grief, but beyond the scope of this discussion, I think. So yeah, you can laugh at it. It's cheap. It certainly is cheap. There's no doubt about that. But it does actually provide you some facility, as we can clearly see. It does work, is functional, and does make things convenient. $17 Canadian. I think you'd be hard pressed to beat it. As I said, if nothing else, you've got a 4-foot extension for your scan tool, which can be handy because these things come with a ridiculously short cable, as you likely know. Okay, so the musical recommendation for tonight, Motorhead. Wow, Overkill, what an album. Ace of Spades. If you don't know Motorhead, you haven't been paying attention. Motorhead went through many incantations throughout the years. This is the classic lineup. Lemmy, of course, Fast Eddie Clarke, and Filthy Phil Taylor, all dead. All dead within the last couple of years, sadly. This is the last variant of Motorhead. They were kicking it for decades and done so unbelievably so. Yeah, if you don't know Motorhead, go and find them. Those 3 albums in particular are my favorites. Overkill, Ace of Spades, of course, and what is it? Iron Fist, fantastic album as well. I should mention, boys, the OBD2 breakout box that we were just discussing there is at the absolute bottom end of the scale. If you're interested in a couple of reviews on higher end equipment, I can recommend Dave Sturrell's video on the subject. He just recently purchased a new one. He does a great review of that. And also JL's Auto Solution. He has, I think it is an OTC product, which is on the upper end of the spectrum as well with respect to OBD2 breakout boxes. And if you're not interested in either, just go and get yourself a Motorhead album. Right, cheers.